Greetings, dear listeners. Tonight, I invite you to journey with me through the history of the Elves, the Firstborn of Ilúvatar. This is a tale of splendor and sorrow, of radiant beauty and tragic loss, where elvenkind faced wonder and betrayal under starlit skies. This is the history of the Elves, a story that begins long before men took their first breath, before the mighty kingdoms of dwarves rose from the stone, and before the Dark Lord Sauron cast his malevolent shadow across the lands. It is the story of the Eldar's journey, of splendor and sorrow, of love and loss. But before we delve into the depths of this ancient tale, I want you, my dear listener, to pause for a moment. Take a deep breath and think of where you are right now. Let me know in the comments below where you're listening from and what time it currently is. Now settle in. Wrap yourself in your coziest blanket and let us drift into the world of elvenkind, where light and darkness forever entwine. At the dawn of time, when the world was young and its lands were still unformed, the Elves, the Firstborn of Ilúvatar, awakened by the rippling waters of Quivinin. They rose with the stars shining bright above them, those same stars that would forever become a source of wonder and inspiration to their kind. Unclothed by time and untouched by corruption, their eyes gleamed with an inner light, reflecting the brilliance of the heavens. There, by the shores of that pristine lake, they looked upon one another, each soul recognizing kin in the other, and for the first time in history they spoke. Their language was music, pure and untouched by sorrow. It echoed across the hills and forests of that distant land, a sound of awakening, like the first song of a new world. Their speech named the things they saw, each tree, each stream, each star above, as if by naming them, they imbued the world itself with life. It was there, at Quivinin, that they were found by Orm, one of the Vala, who roamed Middle-earth under the orders of the high powers that dwelt in the Undying Lands. He marveled at the sight of the Eldar, the Quendi, as they called themselves, the speakers, the beings for whom J.R.R.'s vision had been set into motion. Orom's approach was not without trepidation, for the elves had lived in shadow and under starlight for untold ages. Unseen and unheard, other beings lurked in the darkness, sent forth by Melkor, the first Dark Lord, who sought to twist and corrupt all life that emerged from J.R.R.'s creation. Whispers of dread filled the Eldar's hearts at the sight of Orm. Some of the Firstborn fled into the wild places, fearing that this radiant being was a servant of shadow. But those who remained listened to his words, learned of the Vala, and heeded his call to journey to Aman, the blessed realm beyond the seas. Thus began the great journey, a voyage that would shape the destinies of the Eldar and leave its mark on all the ages to come. The elves were sundered even as they set forth. Some, who became known as the Avari, refused the call, choosing to remain in Middle-earth under the stars they loved so dearly. The rest followed Orm westward, crossing vast lands and mighty rivers, their eyes ever fixed on the distant light that was beyond their sight but burned in their hearts as a promise of greater beauty and splendor. As they traveled, the Eldar divided further. The Vanir, led by Ingvi, were the first to reach Aman. They were the most devoted to the Vala and became the High Elves, dwelling ever in the light of the two trees, Laurelin and Telperion. Next came the Noldor, led by Finwë, whose minds hungered for knowledge and whose hands longed to shape the world around them. Lastly came the Teleri, the most numerous and reluctant of the Eldar. They lingered longest on the shores of Middle-earth, drawn by the sea and the voice of the waves. Many of them, under the leadership of Elwë and Olwe, crossed the sea at last, but some remained behind, enchanted by the lands they traversed. Elwë, later known as Elethingel, was lost in the woods of Beleriand, and there met Melian, a Maya of great power and beauty. Entranced by her, he forgot the journey to Aman and founded the realm of Doriath, a hidden sanctuary of the Sindar Elves, those who stayed behind but still yearned for the light of Aman. This was the beginning of the sundering of the Elves, and it was not the last. The seeds of separation and longing were sown early, but for now, the promise of Aman shone bright in their hearts. Even as some stayed and some went, the Eldar would forever be marked by that first division, the choice to follow the light, or to remain under the dark, unchanging stars of Middle-earth. With the Vala's guidance, the Vanir, Noldor, and many of the Teleri came to Aman, where they beheld the glory of the two trees and the vast, untainted lands of the west. Their cities rose tall, shimmering with a radiance unmatched by any seen before or since. In those days of bliss, the Eldar flourished, mastering arts, music, and craft beyond comprehension. But even then, the first shadows of discontent stirred within their hearts, for not all elves found peace, and not all journeys ended with joy. Thus, the history of the Eldar began, a tale of beauty and sorrow, of splendor and ruin, of light and shadow interwoven as tightly as the strands of their own fate. It was a tale whose roots stretched back to the waters of Quivionen, where the firstborn children of Ilúvatar woke to a world of wonder, but also of unseen perils that would one day shatter all that they held dear. Valinor, the blessed realm, rose like a vision from a dream in the hearts of the Eldar who had completed the great journey. Situated beyond the Pelori Mountains, it was a land untouched by shadow, where the light of the two trees, Telperion and Laurelin, poured forth a radiance more glorious than the stars they had known. In this land of eternal twilight, the elves beheld marvels and wonders that surpassed all they had ever imagined. The Vanir, Noldor, and Teleri found themselves surrounded by sights so magnificent that many fell silent, overwhelmed by the beauty that the Vala had crafted in their honor. The Vanir, led by Ingvi, were the first to dwell upon the high slopes of Tanaquetil, the tallest mountain in the world. They became the High Elves, whose voices were mingled with the music of the Aenir, and whose wisdom grew deep and profound. Their joy was in song and prayer, and they lived closest to the Vala, sharing in their counsels and thoughts. The Noldor, however, were of a different mind. Under the leadership of Finwë, they made their homes in Tirion upon Tuna, a hill that overlooked the sea from afar. In the white halls of Tirion, the Noldor became the greatest craftsmen, their hands ever busy, shaping gems and metals, weaving intricate designs that shimmered with the inner light of the trees. The Teleri, the last to reach Aman, were divided once more. Some, led by Olwe, dwelt by the shores of the sea at Alqualand, the Swan Haven, where they built ships of white and silver. There, they sang to the waves and learned the language of the sea, becoming the most skilled mariners and shipwrights. But others of their kindred, those led by Elwes' brother Olwe, remained in Middle-earth, enchanted by its forests and rivers. Yet, despite their separation, the longing for Valinor, for the light of the two trees, always lingered in the hearts of those left behind. It was in this time of peace and splendor that Fëanor, the greatest of the Noldor and eldest son of Finwë, rose to unmatched prominence. His mind was a blazing fire, quick and consuming. He mastered all arts of lore and craft, and in his hands, jewels and gems took on a beauty unseen in all of Arda. None, not even the Vala, could rival his skill, for he wove into his creations the very essence of his spirit. Yet it was his creation of the Silmarils that would prove his triumph, and his doom. The Silmarils were no mere gems. Into them, Fëanor captured the light of the two trees themselves, blending the radiant silver of Telperion and the golden glow of Lorelin into three perfect jewels. These were treasures beyond any value, for the Silmarils held within them a living light, a remnant of the purity of Aman. Fëanor's pride in them knew no bounds, for he saw them as the apex of all that he was. But pride often comes with a shadow, and Melkor, the first Dark Lord, watched from the darkness, weaving his schemes with subtlety and guile. In the guise of friendship, Melkor approached Fëanor, speaking words that fanned the flames of the Noldor's ambition. He whispered of things kept hidden by the Vala, secrets of power that lay beyond the bounds of their knowledge. Slowly, doubt and jealousy grew in Fëanor's heart. He began to see his half-brothers, Fingolfin and Finarfin, as rivals, and even his father, Finwë, could not temper his fiery spirit. The harmony of Valinor was marred by these dark thoughts, and though the Vala sought to soothe the unrest, their efforts came too late. In secret, Fëanor forged weapons, preparing for conflicts that were only imagined in his mind. Fingolfin, aware of the growing discord, sought peace, but Fëanor, blinded by his pride and suspicion, drew his sword upon his own kin in the halls of Tirion. This act, though it did not spill blood, was a portent of darker deeds to come. The Vala, dismayed and saddened by what they saw, summoned Fëanor to their judgment hall. There, in the Ring of Doom, Fëanor was ordered to lay down his weapons and cease his rebellious words. Yet it was then that the greatest calamity befell Aman. Melkor, seizing his moment, struck at the very heart of Valinor. With the aid of Ungoliant, a monstrous spirit of darkness and greed, he crept into the land of the two trees. Ungoliant devoured the light of the trees, leaving only withered trunks behind, and an eternal darkness fell upon Valinor. In this gloom, Melkor slew Finwë, Fëanor's father, in his own halls and stole the Silmarils, escaping into the night with his terrible ally. The grief and wrath of Fëanor were beyond words. In that moment, he cursed Melkor and named him Morgoth the Black, enemy of the world. He swore a dreadful oath with his 7 sons, vowing to pursue Morgoth to the ends of the world and beyond, to recover the Silmarils, no matter the cost. This oath bound them to darkness, for it was made with such force that even the Vala could not undo it. Under its weight, the Noldor fell into madness, their once bright spirits twisted by vengeance and pride. Thus began the march of the Noldor from Valinor. Fëanor, defiant and unyielding, led his people back to Middle-earth, but not without a terrible price. At the Swan Haven of Alqualand, he demanded the ships of the Teleri to cross the sea. When the Teleri refused, not wishing to aid in his rebellion, Fëanor ordered his followers to take the ships by force. In the battle that ensued, the first blood of elves by elves was spilled. It was a kinslaying, a tragic and senseless act that stained the Noldor with a curse they would carry forever. Even after the doom pronounced by Mandos, warning them that no good would come from their actions, the Noldor pressed on. They crossed the treacherous Helcarax, the grinding ice, losing many in the frozen wasteland. But neither the curses of the Vala nor the deadly cold could turn them from their course. Fëanor's fiery will drove them forward, and at last they reached the shores of Middle-earth. There, under the shadow of Unwind, the fortress of Morgoth, the Noldor prepared for war, not knowing that they would bring untold ruin upon themselves and all they held dear. The splendor of Valinor had given way to the shadow of rebellion. The light of the trees was no more, and in its place burned only the consuming fire of vengeance and sorrow. The Noldor, once the greatest of the elves, now stood upon the brink of ruin, their hearts and fates bound to the Silmarils, the very jewels that had once been the pride of their people. When the Noldor set foot upon the shores of Middle-earth, it was as if a storm had broken free from the heavens and crashed against the land. Led by Fëanor, their arrival heralded a new era, a time of unrelenting conflict, of defiance against the tyranny of Morgoth. But even as they stood upon the darkened sands of the land they had once left behind, the weight of their cursed oath loomed over them, and the land itself seemed to whisper warnings of the fate that awaited them. It was a grim world they entered, for the stars shone dimly and a perpetual shadow loomed over the northern skies. Morgoth had returned to his fortress of Unwind, deep beneath the Iron Mountains, and there he crafted legions of fell creatures, orcs, trolls, balrogs, and other beasts of fire and shadow. He wielded the stolen Silmarils as symbols of his dominion, mocking the Eldar who had sworn to reclaim them. Yet the Noldor, despite their diminished numbers and the bitterness of their flight, were not cowed. The first encounter with Morgoth's forces came swiftly. Fëanor, burning with the intensity of a star, led his host in an assault upon the gates of Unwind. There, upon the plains of Ardgalen, the Noldor won their first victory, scattering the forces of Morgoth. Yet, Fëanor's triumph was brief. Driven by the madness of his oath and heedless of his own safety, he pursued the fleeing orcs to the very doors of Unwind. It was there, in the shadow of Thangordrim, that Fëanor met his end. The Balrogs, led by Gothmog, the Lord of Balrogs, assailed him. Though he fought valiantly, his fury alone could not withstand their combined might. Mortally wounded, Fëanor was borne away by his sons, but his spirit burned too brightly to linger long. With his dying breath, he cursed Morgoth and bade his sons to keep their oath, never to relent until the Silmarils were reclaimed. As his spirit departed, his body, consumed by its own inner fire, turned to ash and was scattered to the winds. Thus perished Fëanor, the greatest of the Noldor, leaving his people bereft of their leader and bound by an oath that would haunt them through all the ages to come. In the wake of Fëanor's death, his sons took up the mantle of leadership, each one driven by the same fierce determination. Maedhros, the eldest, sought to consolidate their power and strengthen their hold in the land. But Morgoth, ever cunning and deceitful, feigned friendship, offering terms of peace and surrender. Trusting in his own strength, Maedhros accepted a parley, only to be betrayed. Captured and tortured, he was hung by the wrist from the precipice of Thangordrim, left to dangle in agony, a reminder to all of Morgoth's cruelty. The Noldor, in disarray and leaderless, fell into despair. Yet hope came from an unexpected place. Fingolfin, Feanor's half-brother, whom Fëanor had once sought to drive away, crossed the deadly Helcarax with his people, arriving in Middle-earth at last. His coming, like a new dawn, revived the spirits of the Noldor. With Fingolfin's arrival, the Noldor united under his banner, and together they sought to free Maedhros. In a daring rescue, Fingon, son of Fingolfin and Maedhros' childhood friend, scaled the heights of Thangordrim, cutting Maedhros free. Bound by this act of courage, Maedhros renounced his claim to the kingship of the Noldor, swearing loyalty to Fingolfin. Thus, the Noldor were made whole once more. With their forces united, the Noldor established their realms throughout Beleriand. Fingolfin ruled from Hithlum, a land of misty mountains and cold winds. Finrod, son of Finarfin, established the kingdom of Nargothrond, a fortress hidden in the caves beneath the river Nerrig. Turgon, Fingolfin's son, withdrew to the hidden Vale of Tumludin and founded Gondolin, the hidden city, whose location was known only to a select few. These strongholds, built with the skill and craft of the Noldor, became bastions against Morgoth's might. But peace was fleeting. Morgoth, ever seeking to shatter the unity of the Eldar, launched attack after attack, each one more devastating than the last. The Daejunuin Gileath, the battle under stars, had been only the beginning. The first battle of Beleriand saw the green elves of Osirian decimated, and the Sindar of Doriath, led by King Thingol, retreating into their enchanted forests, protected by Melion's girdle. Morgoth's hatred for the Noldor was unrelenting, and his armies grew ever larger, fed by the breeding pits of Unband. The Noldor, however, were not without hope. They forged alliances with the Sindar and the newly awakened race of men, who had begun to settle in Beleriand. The sons of Bir, Hader, and Halath pledged themselves to the service of the Eldar, and in return, they were taught the arts of war and wisdom. Under the banners of Fingolfin and his kin, the Eldar and Edain marched against Morgoth in the Daejer Glarib, the glorious battle, and for a time, the plains of Ardgalen were freed from the shadow of Unband. Yet Morgoth was patient. He bided his time, building his strength, and sowing seeds of discord among his enemies. When he struck again, it was with a force that shattered the hopes of the Eldar. The Battle of Sudden Flame, or Daejer Bragalak, was a cataclysm. Rivers of fire poured forth from the Iron Mountains, scorching the lands and driving the Noldor back. Fingolfin, in his fury and despair, rode forth alone to challenge Morgoth in single combat. It was a deed of such valor that it became legend among all the peoples of Middle-earth. Before the gates of Unband, he called Morgoth out, naming him craven and coward. Morgoth, though filled with dread, came forth, for he could not endure the shame of refusing the challenge. The duel was terrible to behold. Fingolfin, with his sword Ringil, struck blow after blow, wounding Morgoth 7 times. But in the end, he was no match for the Dark Lord's might. Morgoth crushed Fingolfin beneath his iron-shod foot, and though Fingolfin's body was broken, his spirit remained unbowed. Thorondr, the king of eagles, bore Fingolfin's body away, and he was laid to rest in the mountains of Hithlum, a beacon of defiance even in death. The Noldor reeled from this loss. Their ranks thinned, their kingdoms shattered, they struggled to hold back the tide of darkness. But hope lingered still. Turgon's hidden city of Gondolin remained untouched, its beauty and strength unknown to Morgoth. And in Doriath, Thingol's realm stood unbroken, guarded by Melian's enchantments. Even as the shadow deepened, whispers of prophecy spoke of one who would come, one who would unite elves, men, and dwarves against Morgoth's tyranny. But for now, the Noldor endured, their pride and valor unbroken, their fates bound to the Silmarils, the tragic jewels that gleamed faintly in the depths of Unwind, a reminder of all they had lost and all they had vowed to regain. Thus, the wars of Beleriand ground on, a relentless struggle that would not end until the world itself was changed forever. The wars of Beleriand raged on, and the Noldor fought valiantly against the darkness that sought to consume them. Their lives were bound to the fates of the Silmarils, those lost jewels that held the light of the two trees. Yet, as time wore on, it became clear that the elves could not withstand Morgoth's power alone. Each victory, though dearly won, was soon followed by a deeper despair, for the Dark Lord's forces seemed inexhaustible. The Noldor began to lose hope, and the kingdoms they had so carefully built began to crumble under the weight of relentless war. It was during this time that the Noldor's closest alliances were tested to their breaking point. While some elves like Finrod Felagund and the Sindar of Doriath sought cooperation with the race of men, others harbored mistrust, viewing these newcomers as fleeting and unworthy of true friendship. Yet, it was from among the Edain, the noble houses of men, that new hope was born. Beren, son of Barahir of the House of Beer, entered the tale of the Silmarils like a flickering flame in the blackness of the night. His life had been one of struggle and survival, for his people had been driven from their homes and hunted by Morgoth's servants. But neither shadow nor terror could quench his spirit. He journeyed through the perilous lands of Dorthonion, and by fate or fortune, came upon the guarded borders of Doriath. There, in the woods of Neldoreth, he beheld Luthien, daughter of Thingol and Melian. Her beauty, unmatched among all the children of Ilúvatar, shone like a light in the darkness, and he fell in love with her at first sight. Luthien, too, looked upon Beren with favor, and thus began a love that defied the very laws of the world. When Beren entered the throne room of Thingol, he declared his love for Luthien and asked for her hand. Thingol, proud and stern, looked upon the mortal man with disdain. He knew of the oath of Fëanor, and though he did not wish to meddle in the affairs of the Noldor, he also sought to protect his daughter from the curse that lay upon the Silmarils. To dissuade Beren, Thingol set an impossible task. To win Luthien's hand, Beren must retrieve one of the Silmarils from the iron crown of Morgoth himself. The quest was meant to be Beren's doom, but he accepted it without hesitation, for his love for Luthien knew no bounds. Luthien, unwilling to let him face the peril alone, followed him, defying her father's will. Together, they braved countless dangers, escaping the dungeons of Sauron and crossing through lands where no elf or man had ever dared to tread. Their journey, filled with feats of courage and cunning, became the stuff of legends. At last, disguised as a bat and a werewolf, Luthien and Beren entered Unband, the very fortress of Morgoth. Luthien, using the power inherited from her mother, Melian, sang a song of such enchantment that even Morgoth himself was lulled into a deep slumber. Beren, seizing the moment, cut a silmaril from Morgoth's crown. But as they fled, their escape was marred by tragedy. The great wolf Karkaroth, bred by Morgoth to be a terror of the north, bit off Beren's hand, swallowing the silmaril whole. Beren and Luthien returned to Doriath, where Thingol, overcome with awe and sorrow at what they had endured, accepted their love. But Karkaroth, driven mad by the light of the silmaril burning within him, rampaged through the forests of Doriath, spreading death and destruction. In the hunt for the wolf, Beren and the greatest warriors of Doriath gave chase. Karkaroth was slain, but not before Beren received a mortal wound. He died with Luthien by his side, and she, in her grief, forsook her immortal life to join him in the halls of Mandos. Their love was so pure and powerful that even the doom of Mandos could not keep them apart. Luthien pleaded before the Vala of Death, singing of her love and loss. Moved by her plea, Mandos granted them a unique fate. They would be allowed to return to Middle-earth, but as mortals, to live out their lives together until the end. Thus, the silmaril reclaimed by Beren and Luthien was passed to Thingol, and the tale of their love became the greatest of all the stories of the elder days. Yet the curse of the silmarils was far from over. The sons of Fëanor, bound by their oath, demanded the jewel from Thingol. The king of Doriath, proud and unyielding, refused to hand it over. Thus, the first rift between the Noldor and the Sindar deepened, setting in motion events that would lead to ruin. Soon after, the mightiest of all battles in Beleriand took place, the Nirnath Arnediad, the Battle of Unnumbered Tears. Morgoth, sensing the growing disunity among his enemies, struck with devastating force. Maedhros, with the help of the Union of Maedhros, a coalition of elves, men, and dwarves, sought to strike a decisive blow against Unband. But the plan was undone by treachery and mistrust. The Easterlings, under the command of Uldr the Accursed, betrayed the Elves, and the forces of Morgoth overwhelmed the allied armies. The plains of Anfoglith, once green and fertile, were stained with the blood of elves, men, and dwarves alike. Fingon, High King of the Noldor, fell before the Balrogs, and his brother Turgon was forced to retreat, taking what survivors he could to Gondolin. Hurin of the House of Hadar, last of the great captains of men, held the rear guard, slaying countless foes with his great axe. In the end, he was captured alive and taken before Morgoth, who cursed him and his kin, dooming the House of Hadar to unending sorrow. In the wake of the Nirnath, the realms of the Noldor fell one by one. Nargothrond, under the leadership of Finrod's nephew, Orodreth, was besieged and destroyed after the treachery of Turin Turambar, another tragic figure of men. Doriath, the last bastion of elven power in Beleriand, was sacked not by Morgoth, but by the sons of Fëanor, who sought to reclaim the silmaril that Beren and Luthien had recovered. In a bloody conflict, Thingol's realm was destroyed, and the once great king was slain. By the end, only two hidden strongholds remained, Gondolin, guarded in secret by Turgon, and the havens of Surion, where the remnant of Doriath's people fled. Yet even these could not escape the curse of the Silmarils. Gondolin, betrayed by Maeglin, a prince of the city, fell to the combined might of Morgoth's forces. Turgon perished amid the flames, and the survivors, led by Tur and Idril, escaped into the wilds. The havens of Sirion, a last refuge for those who had escaped the ruin of Doriath and Gondolin, became the final battleground in the tragic saga of the Noldor. The sons of Fëanor, driven by their oath, attacked the havens, slaughtering their own kin once more. Elwing, granddaughter of Beren and Luthien, cast herself into the sea with the Silmaril rather than surrender it. By the grace of Ulmo, the Vala of the waters, she was transformed into a great white bird and bore the jewel to her husband, Eärendil. Eärendil, half-elven and weary of the unending bloodshed, took the Silmaril and sailed into the Undying Lands, the only mortal to do so willingly. Standing before the Vala, he pleaded for their aid in ending the tyranny of Morgoth. The Vala, moved by his plea, gathered their strength and returned to Middle-earth, bringing with them the wrath of the West. The War of Wrath, the final conflict of the First Age, was cataclysmic. The hosts of the Vala swept across Beleriand, breaking the power of Morgoth and casting him into the void. The land itself was shattered, and most of Beleriand sank beneath the sea. The remaining Silmarils, taken by Maedhros and Maglar, brought them no joy. Maedhros, consumed by guilt and despair, threw himself into a fiery chasm, and Maglar, driven mad by sorrow, cast his Silmaril into the sea and wandered the shores, singing laments until he faded into legend. Thus ended the story of the Noldor's quest for the Silmarils, a tale of glory and sorrow, of beauty and betrayal, of love and despair. The light of the Silmarils, though lost to the world, lived on in the stars, in the memory of those who had seen them, and in the songs that would echo through all the ages to come. The war-ravaged land of Beleriand, once a realm of majestic forests, flowing rivers, and towering peaks, lay shattered and broken in the aftermath of the War of Wrath. The ground, scorched and rent by the immense power of the Vala and the cataclysmic forces of Morgoth, crumbled and sank beneath the waves. Only fragments of the once great lands of the Eldar remained, withstanding the deluge that swept over it, transforming Beleriand into a mere memory, a legend preserved in song and story. But as the dust settled and the sky cleared, a new age dawned over Middle-earth. The Elves, having borne witness to the triumph and tragedy of the First Age, looked upon this new era with both hope and trepidation. For while Morgoth was no more, his malice remained imprinted upon the hearts of the world. His greatest servant, Sauron, had escaped judgment, fleeing into the shadows of Middle-earth, biding his time, awaiting the opportunity to rise once more. With the end of the First Age, the Eldar faced a crossroads. The Vala, seeing the devastation wrought upon Middle-earth and the dwindling of the Elves' once great power, extended an offer of mercy. They called upon the Eldar to sail across the sea, back to the Undying Lands, where the wounds of the past could be healed, and where the curse of the Silmarils would trouble them no longer. It was a summons that many heeded. The ships of Círdan, lord of the Falathrim, were filled with those weary of war and longing for peace. They sailed into the west, their sails catching the light of the setting sun, never to return. Yet not all chose to depart. Among those who stayed were the leaders and survivors of the great elven houses, the Noldor and the Sindar, as well as the wandering remnants of the green elves of Osirian. They chose to remain, not out of defiance or pride, but because they felt a duty, a calling to safeguard Middle-earth, to nurture its lands, and to stand against whatever darkness might arise in the future. Among them were Gil-galad, last High King of the Noldor, and Galadriel, daughter of Finarfin, a wise and powerful lady whose counsel would shape the events of the coming age. Gil-galad established his kingdom in Lindon, the westernmost realm of Middle-earth, which stood upon the edge of the sundering seas. It was a land of tall trees and green fields, where the last vestiges of Beleriand met the ocean waves. Under his rule, Lindon became a sanctuary for those who had suffered the sorrows of the First Age, a place where elves, both Sindar and Noldor, could find refuge and begin anew. But Gil-galad, ever mindful of the frailties of peace, did not forget the lessons of the past. He kept watchful eyes upon the east, where the shadow of Sauron, though unseen, began to stretch once more. Galadriel, alongside her husband Celeborn, wandered the lands of Eriador, seeking a place to settle, a place where they could establish their own realm. In time, they would find that haven in the golden woods of Lothlorien, though it would be many years before its splendor blossomed. For now, they moved as nomads, their people scattered, yet ever vigilant. While the elves were re-establishing their realms, the race of men was also rising. During the War of Wrath, the Vala had rewarded the Edain, the faithful allies of the elves, with a gift beyond measure. They raised an island from the depths of the sea, and upon it the Númenóreans, the most noble of men, established their kingdom. It was named Númenor, the land of the star, and their men flourished, growing tall and wise, with lifespans far exceeding those of their kin in Middle-earth. Though separated by sea, the bond between the elves and the Númenóreans was strong. The ships of Númenor sailed often to Lindon and other elven ports, bearing gifts and news. For a time, there was peace, and hope that the darkness of the past had been banished forever. Yet the darkness had not left. It merely slept, awaiting the hour of its awakening. In the shadows of Middle-earth, Sauron, Morgoth's former lieutenant, gathered his strength. He was no longer the beautiful and deceiving Maya who had once served all in Valinor. He had been twisted by Morgoth's malice and the terrible power of the One Ring, which he secretly forged in the fires of Mount Doom. The ring was a part of him, a tool through which he could bend the wills of others and enslave all free peoples. To ensnare the elves, he devised a cunning plan. Sauron took on a fair form, calling himself Anatar, the Lord of Gifts. He came to the elven smiths of Eregion, a land of craftsmen and jewelers, where Celebrimbor, grandson of Fëanor, ruled. Celebrimbor, ever seeking to match the greatness of his grandfather, was drawn to Anatar's promises of knowledge and power. Under Anatar's tutelage, the elven smiths forged the rings of power, rings of such potency that they could control the fate of those who bore them. There were 9 for the kings of men, 7 for the dwarf lords, and 3 for the elves. Yet, in secret, Sauron forged the One Ring in the fires of Orodruin. With the One Ring, he intended to control all the others, to bind the bearers of the rings to his will. But the elves, sensing his treachery, took off their rings. Celebrimbor, realizing his grave mistake, defied Sauron and hid the 3 elven rings, Narya, Nenya, and Vilya, keeping them beyond his reach. Enraged by this betrayal, Sauron unleashed his armies upon Eregion. The war that followed was brutal. Eregion was laid to waste, its cities burned, its people scattered. Celebrimbor, captured and tortured, revealed the whereabouts of the Seven and the Nine but refused to betray the location of the Three. In his wrath, Sauron slew him and hung his body as a banner before his advancing legions. Yet, the Three Rings remained hidden, and their power beyond his grasp. The Elves, rallying under the banners of Gil-galad and Elrond, fought back. Lindon, fortified and vigilant, stood firm against Sauron's onslaught. Elrond, leading a host of refugees from Eregion, established the haven of Imladris, later known as Rivendell, a sanctuary where the wisdom and strength of the elves could endure. There, they resisted Sauron's advances, though at great cost. But it was not the elves alone who opposed the Dark Lord. In the distant west, the Númenóreans, under their mighty kings, heard of the elves' plight and sailed to their aid. The sight of Númenórean ships, their white sails billowing like clouds, struck fear into the heart of Sauron's forces. With the combined strength of the Númenóreans and the elves, Sauron's armies were driven back. He retreated to Mordor, the land he had made his own, and there he brooded, plotting his revenge. The Second Age was marked by a growing shadow, as Sauron slowly rebuilt his power. He enslaved the 9 mortal kings who bore the rings of men, transforming them into the Nazgul, his most dreaded servants. The 7 dwarven rings kindled a greed within their bearers, leading to the accumulation of great hoards of treasure and the eventual downfall of many dwarven strongholds. Yet the elves, with their wisdom and foresight, wielded the 3 rings in secret. They did not use them to dominate or control, but to preserve and heal. Galadriel, bearing Nenya, the Ring of Water, nurtured Lothlorien, transforming it into a realm of timeless beauty. Elrond, wielding Vilya, the Ring of Air, safeguarded Imladris, ensuring it would remain a place of refuge and wisdom. Gil-galad held Narya, the Ring of Fire, and with its strength, he inspired courage and hope in the hearts of his people. The centuries rolled on, and though Sauron's influence spread, he could not overcome the strength of the elves and their allies. The final confrontation of the Second Age, however, was inevitable. Sauron's malice could not be contained forever, and the peace between elves and men would soon be tested as the Dark Lord rose to claim dominion over all Middle-earth. The last alliance of elves and men was formed, led by Gil-galad and Elendil, High King of the Númenóreans in exile. With great banners flying and swords gleaming in the sun, the armies of elves and men marched to Mordor, their numbers vast, their resolve unshaken. The battle that ensued upon the slopes of Mount Doom was a clash of titanic forces, the like of which had not been seen since the War of Wrath. Gil-galad and Elendil fought side by side, their blades carving through Sauron's legions. But even the combined might of elves and men could not easily overcome the Dark Lord. Sauron himself entered the fray, towering above his enemies, wielding the One Ring with terrible power. He struck down Gil-galad and Elendil, their bodies falling lifeless to the ground. But Isildur, son of Elendil, took up the broken hilt of his father's sword, Narsil, and with a desperate stroke, he cut the One Ring from Sauron's hand. The Dark Lord's physical form was destroyed, and his spirit fled, broken and weakened. The Second Age came to an end, and with it, the elves' dominion over Middle-earth began to wane.